Hi, Daniel from Two Petals. Today I just wanted to introduce you to the Babylock Victory Overlocker and show you how to get started. Let's take a closer look. Before we get started, I want to talk about some of the settings we can control on this machine and what all of the different knobs and dials do. Let's zoom into the first knob here. This knob will control our cutting width. So as I turn that one, you can see it's increasing or decreasing depending which setting I have on there. And on the knob itself, you can see there's two numbers, a big number and a small number. The big one is the seam allowance from our left needle, and the smaller number is the seam allowance from our right needle. So whether we're using both needles or just one needle, we can refer to this number to know what our seam allowance is going to end up as. For most common garments and most patterns, I'll use a 1/4 inch or about 6mm seam allowance. So usually I'll line up this setting with the arrow here. This arrow dictates what that setting is set to. The next most important setting will be our stitch length, which is controlled by this knob here. We can set it to be shorter or longer, and our setting will be aligned with this triangle here. So the point of that triangle is what our setting is on, and you'll notice that there's two halves to this dial. There's a standard and there's also a rolled hem, and basically what that does, I'll open this up so we can see. For a regular overlock seam, we want our stitch finger to be out here like this one, and then when we switch over to a rolled hem, so we'll go all the way around past 0 up to here, and that little stitch finger is automatically popping out of the way for us. So when we do a rolled hem, that'll automatically get out the way and allow the edge of the fabric to be tucked in and rolled over. And next setting is the blade lock. If I let it go freely, our knife will move up and down as expected, and it'll cut the fabric as we sew. If we change the setting to be lock, the knife will stay still, so that won't cut the fabric anymore, and we can use the edge of that knife as a guide to help us feed the fabric in evenly. So that's locked. Unlocked, the knife moves up and down again. At the top of the machine here we have this dial which controls our foot pressure. So that's basically how hard our presser foot is squeezing our fabric as it sews. Most of the time I'll leave this alone, but if I'm sewing a lot of fleecy fabric which is quite thick and fluffy, I sometimes will reduce that foot pressure just so it doesn't lettuce or squish out as much. If I'm sewing a lot of really fine fabric, I may consider increasing that a little bit to improve the feed. Mostly I'd only change that if I'm going to like the extreme of like a fabric thickness, but most of the time I'll just leave that alone generally. Inside of our front cover we have the tension dial. We don't have individual tensions for each thread. Instead we select a different tension profile depending on the stitch we're sewing. Makes the whole process a lot simpler, and especially as our machine doesn't actually have any tension dials. All of what the machine does to adjust tension is done automatically through sensors in the foot, and so pretty much we only just need to set the general profile of the stitch we're sewing, and then the machine handles the rest. So let's get started with threading our overlocker and do our first stitch. Inside your box you'll have a quick reference guide which I'll be following along as I thread the machine. I've set up my threads to be the same colour here so you can follow along a little bit more easily. We'll be threading our machine to sew a 4-thread overlock, which is probably the most common stitch that you'll use on your overlocker for creating garments and generally strong seams. Let's follow along in each of the steps here, and we'll make sure our machine is set correctly. The first one is to check the needles, which we'll use both the left and the right needle, which I have got in there, 2 needles. The next setting is going to be our stitch length. For this seam it's recommending between 2.5 and 3.5. So we'll go over to our stitch length here. I like to be on 3 personally, but anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 is totally fine. For our width, it's suggesting 6 to 7.5, and for my sewing I like to keep it on 6, so I'll keep it just there. The arrow is pointing to the 6. And the stitch selector is asked to be on A, which is this dial here. So we can go A, B, C, D, and we'll leave it on A for this particular stitch. Now that our settings are all correct, I'll just open up this cover here as well. And to activate the air threading at the bottom, we'll press this button, and you'll notice it didn't close all the way and our tubes aren't reaching all the way over. That's because we need to turn our hand wheel a little bit until the machine gets to the right position for air threading. As we turn, we hear a ping, and then this lever is all the way across. So now we're ready for air threading. I'm going to thread the blue thread first, which is going to be the lower looper. So I'll make sure that the thread is passing through our thread tree neatly, it's not getting tangled. And over here we have some little spring latches. So when we lay the thread in and put a bit of tension on, it will make a click noise, just like that. And that'll lock our thread in to make sure that it's not going to fly out as we're sewing. Also make sure that your thread tree is extended fully, so that the thread can feed off the cones nice and smoothly. Now my blue thread is down the bottom here. I like to give the end a bit of a trim, just to make sure it's nice and smooth and going to be easily able to go through the tubes. I will usually draw out a fair bit of thread. I'll usually touch the thread to the cover, and that'll leave me with about 30 or 40 centimeters or so of thread. We're threading the lower looper first, so I'll make sure that my dial is set to L on the right, and I will put my thread into the tube just a couple of centimeters or so. Now when I pump on this lever here, it will thread itself through the bottom just like that. And if you have found that it didn't make it all the way through, you didn't leave enough thread, you can draw a little bit more out and pump it again. So if you didn't leave enough initially, not a problem, you can just draw some more out. I'm going to repeat the same for the yellow thread as well. I'll click in the yellow thread up the top, bring it down here. I'll snip the end of my thread just to make sure it's not too fluffy or frayed. Draw out about 30 centimeters of thread. I'll flick the lever to the U now. This will be our upper looper thread. Put in a couple of centimeters or so into the tube. Pump here, and that's just flown out the left side here. Now it's time to thread our needles. For this machine, I need to disengage the metal tubes at the bottom for the looper threading. So I'll slide this to the right, and then on the side of the machine, there is a green mark. I need to turn the hand wheel very slightly so the green marks are lining up together, just like that. Now with our needle thread, I will take the green thread up through the thread tree and clip it in the top just as before with the other threads. I'm going to put it behind this little hook. I'm going to catch it on this metal part here, go up and around, just like that. And I'll tuck it behind this little part here, so it keeps it directly above the thread. When we use a needle threader, it has two settings, one for the left needle and one for the right. So I'm threading the right needle first. I'll flick it over to the right, and then the way I like to use this needle threader, I'll just change my angle, just like that. I like to make a triangle shape with my finger and the thread like this, and then I can press down the needle threader, feed it in just like that, and it will draw it out the back for me nicely. I'll repeat the same again for the left needle now with my red thread. I'll take it through the thread tree, clip it into the back, go down, up and around, and then I'll tuck it behind there. Now when I thread the left needle, I'll flick the lever to the left side, make a triangle shape like that with my finger, feed the thread under there and release, and take the thread out to the back of the needle. If your fingers are a little bit fat like mine and you can't quite get in there, there is a handy little tweezer in the toolkit, which I like to use to just grab the thread and tuck it at the back. Now that we're all threaded, we can close up the door of our machine, and you can either tuck the threads under the foot before you start sewing, or what I like to do is just lower the foot and sew a few stitches, and then I can just draw them out the back just like that. The machine will sew perfectly fine even if you don't tuck the threads underneath the foot. The way that everything's positioned with the air threading and needle threaders, it will work just with wherever the threads are laying. So you don't need to worry too much about that. Now let's sew our stitch. I'll lower my presser foot and I will start to sew. There we have it, a very beautiful 4-thread overlock seam. And the great thing about the Babylock Victory's automatic thread delivery system, I don't need to change any tensions when I'm sewing different materials, whether it's stretch, denim, fleecy, fluffy fabric, or really fine fabric. I can just leave my stitches exactly as they were, and they will sew up beautifully every time. So without changing any settings, I'll sew over my stretch fabric. Then straight away, without changing anything, I'll go over to my denim. And next, my fleecy fabric. And finally, this really fine fabric. And you can see the threads are meeting there perfectly on the edge of the fabric every time, whether it's a bit thinner, thicker, really thick. You can see the threads are meeting perfectly around the edge, even from going to extremes of thick and thin. This fleece fabric and the really fine fabric is sewing perfectly without having to adjust anything. If I need to change needles, whether if it's because it's bent or blunt, or I just want to change to a 3-thread stitch, I'll first start by trimming off the left needle, for example, trim the thread out of there, and then I can use my flathead screwdriver that's provided in the toolkit to loosen this screw here, and then remove the needle, just like that. And don't forget to tighten up this screw here. Make sure that's tight when the needle's out. Very important that you do that. Your screw may pop out of there. To put our needle back in, we'll loosen this screw again. And we'll take our needle and with the flat side towards the back, slide it up in there. And as you insert it, you'll be able to see in the window, our needle should be butted all the way to the top of this little window here. Once you can see it's all the way in, we'll tighten the screw nice and firmly, just like that. It's in there nice and snug. Now we can re-thread the needle and we're ready to sew again. When it comes to cleaning a machine, there's a handy little brush that's located inside a little toolkit here. This one's super handy. The places we need to clean inside here, a lot of fluff from the cutter will tend to accumulate. So now and then I like to give it a bit of a brush around the cutter, make sure there's no chunks building up anywhere, clean out any large chunks. I hope this video helped you get started with your Babylock Victory overlocker. If you'd like to learn how to do some different stitches and techniques on your Babylock, check out our playlist and find some different ideas there. Thanks and have a good day.